Hi, I'm Nick Madrid. Welcome to Bloomberg and our West Coast Tech Hub, which we opened in May of last year. We're very happy to have all you here, so thank you all for coming. The Data for Good Exchange follows a long tradition at Bloomberg to leverage data and technology to really solve major problems. Since the start, Mike Bloomberg has focused on leveraging technology and data to bring transparency and efficiency to the capital markets. So I think it's a great, kind of segue into how we can apply that to the election, given the importance of this time. Two quick plugs. I want to thank you, Regina, and thank you, SF Tech for Good. We really appreciate it. We are hiring, so if you're interested, talk to me. But we also want to host more events here. So if you do have an event that you're interested in, please talk to me after. Would love to hear more about that. So I'll pass it on to Regina.
All right, thank you, Nick. And Bloomberg, this is actually the second event that we have done here. So again, thank you guys so much for hosting us in this space. And oops, how do I change the slide? Is there a slide thing? Oh, there it is. I want to talk to you guys about SF Tech for Good. So this will be really quick. I want to know, is this whose first SF Tech for Good event is this? First time? Oh my gosh. Well, welcome very much. Okay, welcome. So basically, SF Tech for Good is now a hybrid group. I started organizing it in 2011, but it was formed in 2006 by TechSoup.org. And now we also have Inten.org that helps us organize. And basically, TechSoup, real quick, if you're a nonprofit or a library, they will help you with both software and hardware at a discounted price. They'll also help you learn how to use it, optimize it to achieve whatever mission it is that you're trying to achieve as a nonprofit and or library. Inten, very similar mission. They help you learn how to use technology. So basically we meet monthly, except for the summertime where we've learned to take a hiatus, and in December where we basically have a social hour. So feel free to join our meetup. We also have a weekly Civic hack night that happens with the Code for America San Francisco Brigade. And that was the first event that we had here. And yeah, Charles actually was speaking at that. And that's it. So just a little bit about Net Squared. Oh.
Debra is ready.
She's ready. And this is awesome. Yeah. So our tagline, mobilize technology and communities for social change. And we organize nonprofit technology meetups. It's around the world. So if you go to netsquared.org, no matter where you move, you'll probably find a group. And if there isn't a group and you're so inclined, you are welcome to start one. And again, Inten. And they help us also. And I'm going to stop there and pass it on to Charles so that the panel can start, because that's really why you're here. So again, thank you for coming, and let's get this party started.
No, I don't need it. But thank you.
Oh, you have a mic. I forgot about that. All right, let me turn this on.
Debra kind of set it off, right? It's going to be that kind of panel. Everybody ready to get wine and shots. First of all, thank you so much for everyone for coming tonight. And thank you to Regina, Tech for Good, Catherine, and Bloomberg for hosting. It's always wonderful when people come out for these events, and they work incredibly hard to organize this and connect all of us together. My name is Charles Belle. I am the CEO and founder of Startup Policy Lab. We are a small think tank located here in the city. We work to connect policymakers with the startup community. This is a bit of an exciting night for us and for me personally. So I'm going to do a couple plugs that I hope will resonate with the crowd. Number one, is anyone familiar with kind of the open source election technology work going on, generally speaking? Okay, so I'm an appointed member on the Committee on Information Technology here in San Francisco, and they just approved the first round of funding to start to explore opening up the election technology here in San Francisco to using open source tools. That was led by Chris Jordanek. If you don't know him, he's someone, talk to me afterwards, you should know about. He's been leading this charge as part of the Elections Commission, been doing a lot of fantastic work. So it's very exciting in terms of the time that we're living in. And along those lines, kind of a shameless plug, but in spring 2017, we're actually hosting a very large multi-day election technology summit that you can find more information on our website, startuppolicylab.org, and you can click election tech at the top and read more about it. Tonight is really special with the panel that we have. I'm going to introduce them individually before we jump in. But just before we do that, a quick logistics. We're going to have the panel. If you have questions, please hold them because you're going to have a chance to ask at the end. So it's a great opportunity to engage. And then because of the fantastic hosting by Bloomberg and the way this is structured, you're going to have a chance to interact with the panel afterwards.
And I forgot to mention, don't forget to
Yeah.
get active.
Well, I was gonna get to that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. so as before we jump into the conversation and say, please follow the conversation. Literally it says on Twitter. And there you see the 2 hashtags right behind me. I won't turn around. But please, share this, put this out there. This is a community-driven organization. These are about issues that we're passionate about, sharing and introducing new people into this this conversation and discussion, especially those that couldn't be here. It's a fantastic opportunity. So with that said, now I'm going to stop speaking, and I'm going to do a quick introduction of the panel starting from my left and moving down, and then we'll jump into the questions. So to my immediate left is Joy Bonaguro. Joy is the first Chief Data Officer for the City and County of San Francisco, where she manages Data SF. The mission of Data SF is to empower use of data, transforming the way the city works through data. Joy has spent more than a decade working at the nexus of public policy, data, design, and technology. She worked from the birth of the open data and open government movement, spending 7 years designing and managing the development of information systems to support planning and decision-making at the Greater New Orleans Community Data. Prior to joining the city, Joy worked at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory to help develop technology, cyber, and privacy policy, working closely with both the National Lab CIO Council and the Department of Energy Information Management Advisory Group. Joy earned her master's from UC Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy, where she focused on IT policy. To Joy's left is Debra Cleaver. Debra has been working at the intersection of technology and democracy since 2014. She currently serves as the founder.
2004.
Oh, excuse me, 4. I apologize. 4. Sorry, Debra. Sorry, 2004. She currently serves as the founder and CEO of Vote.org, a nonpartisan nonprofit digital voting organization that aims to use digital technology to remove barriers to voting and increase voter turnout. Under Debra's leadership, Vote.org won the prestigious Knight News Challenge in 2015 and was accepted into Y Combinator's 2016 summer cohort. Her work has been featured in Forbes, the Huffington Post, and Bustle. Excuse me. To her left is Carla Mays. Carla Mays is the CEO of Mays Innovation. She is also a fellow, a Singularity University Impact Fellow, and her team won the Hillary Clinton Presidential Hackathon recently. To Debra's left is Alex Kranenburg. Alex is co-founder of Politalk, a political mobile app focused on helping voters discover their political identity and surface the best of politics. He oversees company strategy, operations, and creative engineering to help fit the needs of all voters. Additionally, Alex is responsible for recruiting and team building. Prior to Politalk, Alex worked as a technology and management consultant for Accenture and Slalom, helping some of the larger tech companies here in San Francisco. He received his BS in mechanical engineering from Santa Clara University. And outside of the office, Alex wants you to know that he's a scratch golfer, a rugby player, and Italian food lover.
I don't know what a scratch golfer is.
Awesome.
That's good. So with that said, we're going to jump into the questions, and to kick it off, we're going to start with we'll start with some basics. And Joy, I'm going to start with my left. Just you got the spot. So here we go. Can you describe what type of data is available on the open data portal that you manage that can be used and is being used to build applications that enable improved voter experiences?
Sure. So there's sort of 2 big chunks of data that you can think about. Well, we put out a lot of data, but I think in particular that might be interesting to this audience is SF elections. They put out not only all the historical data on elections, precinct participation, who voted what in each precinct for not just candidates, but ballot measures, propositions, all that sort of thing. They're also putting out active data on what's coming in terms of who's submitting, mail-in ballots, precinct by precinct on a daily basis, right? So you can immediately start to use and leverage that to do targeted outreach and engagement around mail-in ballots. And so they have a whole cluster of data, including a lot of geographic data that helps you understand the distribution of voting across the city. Another sort of big publisher of data that I think you would find relevant for this area is our Ethics Commission. So they publish everything from financial disclosure laws, lobbyist contributions, campaign contributions, lots of really, really rich detail. And the way we've seen people use this data around elections time in particular is in particular visualizing it, right? A lot of this data, it's sort of, it's spreadsheets, right? So that's not the most compelling way of consuming data. And so what we've seen happen the most with this data is people really analyzing it and visualizing it to understand the trends, the micro trends across neighborhoods in San Francisco. So our local brigade, how many people have heard of Code for San Francisco? A decent amount. Earlier, actually at the beginning of this year, they started a new group there called the Data Science Working Group, and they're spending a lot of time visualizing this data. So, for example, you can go to their website and view how they analyze precinct by precinct voting during the primary elections, and this was it's just really, no one had done that, right? So visualizations are simple, but they're really, really core towards helping people engage this data that can be sort of flat and not so compelling.
So that's a good, I like the way you separate the two kind of sources of data. And so, because that's a perfect segue into Debra and asking maybe, especially I guess maybe focusing on the first part, that election data, to piggyback off of Joy. How have you used public data to inform how you're building your app and the information that you provide to voters? Or is it, are you just using, is it something completely separate from the information the government's providing?
Make sure you turn your mic on, because I forgot.
I think my mic's on, I can hear it. We generally don't use public data until this year. I mean, most people find us via like search engine optimization or partnerships. People come to us and then they provide us with their data. So we are in a different position, but this isn't very open. I don't even know if you guys want to hear about it. We are currently purchasing millions of cell phone numbers and identifying information for unregistered voters in America. And then we have a paid team of people based in Tennessee who text them directly. And I imagine that the people who we buy from are using public data. But you won't find that on our website, because even my mother's creeped out by this. My mother's like, where do you get the cell phone numbers? And I'm like, I buy them for a penny, along with like every piece of identifying information you can think of. So I assume some of it is public. We don't make it public,
Right.
but we do aggregate like our data at the end of election cycles, and publish like stats on usage and things like that. But
it's an interesting example of how you can use, we'll say private collected data, and you can cross-reference it against open data. So you couldn't, for example, in theory say, Charles isn't registered to vote, I am registered to vote. Charles isn't registered to vote, but when you can see that I did register to vote, right? And then from there, did I vote?
Yeah, right? As we move into like get out the vote season, which starts in about 10 days, that's when we start using publicly available data, because we don't want to run get out the vote efforts with people who have already voted, because it's expensive to do that. And then we also, to measure the efficacy of our programs, get what is called a voter propensity score. Whether or not you vote is public record, so we can take the number of elections you've been eligible for, divided by the number that you've actually voted in, and use that to get your voter propensity score, which we then ingest, append to your records, and then use complicated math to determine whether or not the things that we did actually increase the chance that you would vote, or if you would have voted anyway. So whether or not you vote is public record, which I feel like everyone in this room knows that, because you're all nodding, but it's amazing how many people don't know that.
Yeah.
I think this is a informed audience.
Carla, you look like you wanted to jump in on that. Is there a comment you want to make? Or I have a separate question about how campaigns, because
Sure.
Debra works on, Vote.org works on getting people registered. Your app just kind of gets people active, activate people. So it's kind of a two-part question. One, are you maybe adopting Debra's approach in terms of using more private data than public data? And two, how can campaigns actually start to leverage this data? How have you, from your experience, to actually get people to register perhaps and activate them to actually go out and vote?
So I come to this from the 2008 Obama campaign, where I really worked with folks that were, that weren't declared, and as well as Republicans who could be swayed. So my claim to fame, especially at home in San Diego and Orange counties, is being able to sway seniors, military and veterans, small businesses, and farmers. So when you're looking at data with those folks, it's a different driver, right? We're not going knocking on their door so much and coming to them. We're understanding what their needs are. We're meeting them where they need to be met. When I was on the campaign trail, I traveled 37 states and Puerto Rico for Obama, working with mostly clubs. Democratic clubs in very wealthy areas that would, that already had their own PACs, which is a very different. A lot of folks think that, this kind of stuff gets funded by the campaign down. It's a lot of grassroots efforts, but not grassroots like you might think. It's grassroots efforts by Democratic clubs and Republican clubs, a lot of 527 groups. I don't know if everybody in the room knows what a 527 group is, but it's normally an issue-based group that comes by. People put a lot of money into them. That's what's referred to as our super PACs. And so you get, folks get together on those kind of issues. You go after certain demographics. So when we look at data, we're looking at who do folks put their money into. In my hometown, down in San Diego County, where I was just at about a couple weeks ago, folks are playing both sides of the field. So we're looking at FEC records. We're not necessarily looking at data on voting. We're actually looking at what horse are they backing financially, and getting really close to like what those issues are. Because at home you've got a lot of wealthy people, and they've got bets on both horses, and then they've got bets on in these 527 super PACs and other types of issue swayers. So you're understanding where the money's going, where these folks have put their money, and then where these issues on these folks. So we're having a lot of forums. We're having a lot of house parties. At a lot of folks' houses where they're getting together and behind gated communities and things of that nature. And we're talking about what the issues are. The campaigns, we have a direct line to those campaigns. The campaigns are bringing us top people in finance, economics, and things, and we're talking about how things are going to be moving, because that's where these folks want to understand who they should be backing. So that's the kind of data that I'm most often looking at, is that campaign, looking at the financial data.
So we've got kind of get you involved, how to engage you, which is a great segue, I think, into Alex with respect to. Actually, I'm going to actually give you a little bit more of an open-ended one, because you're talking about engagement. Your app is really about engagement. And so could you do a brief description of your app and why it matters? And then I want to talk about what kind of information, how these different pieces fit into that the panel's talked about.
Yeah, so my brother and I started Politalk about a little over a year ago, and basically our goal going into it was to help people discover their political identity, as well as kind of surface the best of politics each day. So when we really started out, the reason, how we came up with the idea was, we were sitting at home and we were filling out our ballot, and we really didn't know who was on our ballot. So that was our first problem that we tried to tackle, is try to keep people informed about who's representing them. And we also realized that there was a lot of negativity within politics. So, okay, how can you surface, not just what the mainstream media is sending you and within your local community, surface the things that really people care about in your local community. So we set out about a year ago, and we've been, kind of iterating, growing since then. We really targeted millennials. So about 80% of our users are in that mid-20s to early 30s age frame. And then another part of that is, kind of giving these people confidence in who represents them, going out to vote. And about 75% of the people of the new voters that are using our app are, reporting that they're more likely to go vote now that they've used our app. So for us, that's a big win. And again, this is our first election cycle as, our own political app, and we're going to start here and continue forward.
So we've talked about, Joyce had a great framework, I think, in saying, look, there's kind of these two main sources of data out there. You've got your election, you've got your ethics commission. And then the panels talked about how...
Private data creepily collected from private.
That's what I was building to, yeah.
No such thing as private.
I
turned my mic off. There is no such thing as private data. There's nothing you can't buy.
Well, but we are talking about a very public-facing, data stack, if you will, right? This information is fairly general and fairly open. Excuse me. So we have these two frameworks. We've talked about, Debra's talked about how they've used private data in, to kind of leverage election data, I'll call it general election data. Carla, you've spoken about how ethics, I think, was something that you said is really important because you're trying to figure out kind of what motivates in a particular issue area driven. And then we talked about how information can be leveraged.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking, starting from Alex and working back this way, what I want to know is kind of, number one, is this kind of the same old thing that we've just been doing for decades? And technology's just kind of changing it? Or two, is this technology's actually allowed us to think about this in a slightly different way or approach this context in a slightly different way? And really what I'm trying to get to, and we'll go into the next section though, is trying to help maybe surface ideas or people or spark ideas in the audience for things that they may want to do after they leave, tonight kind of thing. So those are the two kind of balances. Same old, or actually technology's opened the door to some of these new ways of opportunity?
So I definitely think technology is being applied today different than it has ever before. I think that definitely speaks a lot to what the social media and big media companies are doing. And the use of data today is more powerful than ever, being able to connect the dots. That's something that, we had before, but at least from my point of view, things that we're trying to do is get people engaged, and understanding how people are engaging with politics and getting more people engaged is something that we're only really able to do with politics, with the influence of social media, to understand who is likely to vote and who's not.
So from my work from the Obama campaign, I've really touched a lot of people on platform, right? I have state and state Senate and state Assembly awards for working with folks on platform. But the most important thing was when I said I traveled 37 states in Puerto Rico was to make sure that I got offline. Because the more I stayed on my computer and I was engaging with folks, it still wasn't the folks that are part of the digital divide. And you really have to be engaged offline in politics to really touch people. So I remember the first time as a native Californian, like being in the heart of the Gulf Coast. And we were only 2 years out of Hurricane Katrina. And really being able to be in these areas, and folks, I would bring them yard signs or whatever, and, driving around in a Prius on the Gulf Coast, right, with my white boyfriend, ex-boyfriend then, and we're driving in a Prius, and, and we're really, you're coming straight up with racism, and the real campaign is rubbers meeting the road, out in the Gulf Coast, where people didn't have computers and things like that. And the campaign really hadn't touched them. They didn't have CNN. They didn't have these things. They just knew that there was a black dude in the race. And they wanted to know more about him, and they were wanting to get involved. And there was an 83-year-old guy down in Texas, and to be able to, he was like basically running with his cane. And he says, I didn't think I'd live to see this day. And bringing him that yard sign and giving him those things, it was different from me sitting in my house down in San Diego online having an experience. And that was the point when I realized that, we have to make these tools online and offline. The issue here is that these tools are actually causing more of a divide. As the more we get online and we're having this experience on Twitter, on Facebook, on all these different campaign platforms, we're really making a divide. When I won the Hillary Clinton hackathon with my team, I took that experience from being on the Obama trail. And we tried to deal with the issues that I had saw up close and personal in Florida and other places. And we realized the campaign didn't understand. So you'll probably research this later on, but we weren't able to implement this. We came up with this amazing voter equity, voter suppression prevention, being at real time, and the campaign was more interested in Farmville. So they went ahead and put in for Farm Bill and badges and things that were sexy, but the real needful of making sure people could vote, and that we were dealing with polling places where the machines are all down and there's no paper ballots, that wasn't of interest. So to me, I'm a little jaded leaving, seeing that what the online tools are, and then have won many hacks over the years where the housing apps, the transit apps, the equity apps, we're actually the governments are not working with us to implement this stuff. Instead, it's Pokemon, right? You can go to play Pokemon to go do something, and we're calling it voter engagement. So I guess, to me, we've got a lot of work to do, and we've got a lot of work to do with our public officials and our candidates to make sure that we're closing the digital divide.
So we've got one says yes, something new. The other says, things aren't. We do have some challenges that are, and the old ways still matter, still have a very big importance. So Debra, where do you fall?
I mean, I'm with you. Like, technology is an amplifier, and what technology lets us do is scale our proven solutions quickly and cheaply, and not to totally derail us, but whatever you built, like, we can partner on that. I have a chunk of money I'm supposed to potentially find a use for.
Connections.
But
Yes.
a couple of thoughts on that, mostly to riff on what you were saying. People want to pretend that, like, voters don't turn out for some reason other than voter suppression. So when you take voting and you add, like, Pokemon or Farmville to it, instead of dealing with, like, the very real situations like North Carolina passing a voter ID law that was so racist, even the Supreme Court had to say this is just racist. So it's not that people don't vote because we haven't gamified voting. People don't vote because we've spent 5 decades passing every imaginable law to make it difficult to vote. And that would go right into Americans aren't apathetic, they're not uninformed. That's like, none of these things are true. These are actually conservative speaking points that exist only to hide very real voter suppression work. So what we view technology as is, like, literally just an amplifier. The real reason vote.org is an online group is I'm, like, as a person, really bad at field work. Like, no one can spend more time in the field and register fewer voters than I can. So I was like, how do we take my terrible personality and interpersonal skills and remove them from the equation? So we turned to the internet, and it turns out we're very charming on the internet. And we found a use for, like, people like me, but all we do is amplify proven strategies. And then the SMS project that I was just telling you guys about with the creepy data acquisition, the question there that we're trying to answer is, can we reduce the cost of the field work that needs to happen, because field is expensive and hard, by picking off a certain percentage of the users using text message? So really, again, I'm bad at field. So I was like, I know I can't do it. I can't go in the field. I won't help. But I'm like, there are some people that are hard to reach in the field. Maybe they live in an apartment building. Good luck getting into an apartment building. Maybe they've moved. Maybe they don't open the door. But 96% of people under 35 have cell phones, so we could text them directly. So literally, I was just like, can we reach more people by getting some of them out of the pool using text message? And if so, my team can send 1,166 text messages in an hour per person, which is more than you can do in field. But we just need some of them to respond, and we freed up field dollars. So it's funny, I run a tech project, so everyone assumes I'm all about tech. I'm like, no, tech is just cheap and fast and it scales. But we're not, this isn't Second Life. We're not inventing new worlds because the internet exists.
So the attorney in me loves to hear that the law still matters, and even with the notion of technology, and that you can't get around the law in certain ways. Like there are ways that it's going to impact. And I also thought it was interesting, just for the crowd, I mean, just to touch on something else that you mentioned, Debra, was cost.
Yeah.
And so when she talks about amplifying versus cost, I think that's an interesting context to keep in mind. So we've talked about different types of where the data sources are. We've talked about, now we've got law in here, we've got cost, and so we're going to move to the government official here. But I'm going to tweak the question for you a little bit and say, we're talking about now, we have this online and offline kind of need still. You work for government, you have to serve all of us. People tend to forget that. But your role is very techie in the sense of at least how it was presented and adopted. How have you found when you're
Definitely not that.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, that's fair. Okay. Well, please talk to that. But but in terms of building the tools that you are, a lot of your audience maybe make a developer for the API, or people trying to data scientists trying to visualize the data that you're putting out there. How have you found trying to make that information available, but also trying to think about the broader spectrum of the potential audience? So that's not just your developers, your data scientists, but maybe your non-techies, and then your digital divide aspect, those that don't have much aspect. How are you maybe thinking about them in some way down the long tail?
Sure. In general, I call open data dump. For the most part, it's not usable to the general population. It's really complicated to navigate. It's hard to download, and that applies to techies as well. I've actually sat down and watched techies use our open data portal and struggle deeply while using it. And so if a sophisticated full stack developer, attending Code for America on a Wednesday night in their free time for fun, in San Francisco is having trouble using our data, then why on God's earth would it be accessible to anybody else? And so I actually got my career started in data democratization, which is about making data accessible to lots of people, regardless of expertise, regardless of background, to participate in public decision-making processes. So open data is sort of like checkbox one. You have to do a lot more with that data. You have to contextualize it. You have to introduce it to people, but you also have to build up overall data literacy at the same time. And so and part of that literacy is having translation layers and having translation interfaces. Some of us love looking at spreadsheets, but the vast majority of us don't. And when we think about human perception likes to see patterns and visualizations. That's why we love maps. Like, if you map something, it's like you're a magician sometimes, right? Because no one's seen a map before or something. So I think what we'll see happen over time is one of two routes, with both having a same sort of direction, which is public data will become more user-friendly because people will build ways of interfacing with it on top of it, not because it'll magically suddenly flip over and be friendly. That doesn't sort of cut us off from working on the data literacy challenge. We still have to work on that, but I think we also have to recognize that we probably need both better ways of consuming data, because even very sophisticated people make statistical errors all of the time. So we need to work on that, but we also need to recognize that new forms of interpreting and analyzing and presenting data will allow more people to absorb and be enriched by it. I'll put just like one little cynical footnote on that, which is that all the research on human cognition and decision making and how the brain works suggests that we have our work cut out for us.
So one of the things to kind of add to what Joy's talking about is that we've got to have more diversity in data science. Those biases and the things that we're moving into this predictive analytics world, and from everything from healthcare to education to housing to how public dollars are spent. We're going to have algorithms with, and AI deciding a lot for us going forward. We need to be able to understand right now we live in a quant-heavy world, and we have no qualitative analysis on this stuff. I mean, most of this data is we don't even know how. There's no in graduate school, and we always talk about IBR standards or whatever. We have no idea. Now we just say, okay, big data, and we've got to start calling the question on this data, like how's it collected? We've got to have some qualitative analysis on it. We've got to start to get more folks involved in data collection and understanding the frameworks. And so, one of the things that we've got to start having is ethical framework around big data. That's something that we don't do right now. I'm very concerned. My background is I have a master's in public administration, and then I'm over at Haas Business School right now, working with the National Science Foundation in looking at what are we going to do about these standards and how it's affecting our economy. With 50% of all jobs due to be automated, we have some real questions on society. And these public dollars, if you've got less dollars, tax dollars and revenue dollars, these predictive analytics are going to be making a lot of decisions for us going forward. And so these are some things, I know Joy has been working on these things. She's got lawyers. I heard you were talking earlier. We've got lawyers. You've got all kinds of folks down there trying to make sure that we have some standards around this stuff. But we've got to start calling the question, because as much as we're excited about opening up these data sets, we also have some folks, we're talking about cybersecurity. We don't really talk about that, but we're opening up these data sets and we're teaching people how to code and stuff. There's some not nice people out there that want to do us harm, and we don't even know what we're putting out there. And a lot of times our government doesn't even have enough money to be able to clean up these data sets. So we've got to do some work around that too.
So I want to actually go back a little bit to Joy for this as kind of the follow-up question. It touches a little bit on some of the things that Carla just mentioned. Government oftentimes comes under a lot of criticism for the data that they're putting out or not putting out, or how they're putting that information out. Can you describe maybe some of the challenges? And the reason I ask that question is I always try to take this opportunity when we have a policymaker here to say, hey, look, it would be great to hear from citizens. It'd be great if we had this kind of voice, whether it's feedback or whether it's telling elected officials that this is important to them. So that's kind of the platform for this. That you're saying these are the challenges maybe I faced, whether it's San Francisco or something you've observed more nationally, or is it just resources? As Carla, if cities had the money, they'd be fine. They could
in terms of the privacy
making the data,
stuff?
making the data accessible. So I'm just strict to the data.
Making the data accessible.
I'm gonna put the privacy issues in a box. It's just
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we gonna come back to that box?
Cybersecurity issues per se.
I like that box.
Well, if you think it's critical, then touch upon it. Yeah.
We can come back to it. But the challenges are, if the question is why aren't governments putting more of their data out there, there's two lines of thoughts I play with around that, and I'll answer the actual challenges in government because they're real and they're not delays or stymieing. It's like actual, real, juicy challenges which we can talk about. I'm starting to if you actually start to read the privacy space and what data is already out there or can be bought for pennies, you could start to hit an existential crisis point where you're like, does it matter? So we'll take that box, Bo, put that over there. So on the reality that I have to live day to day, our challenges are a bunch. So one is that the last thing we want to do is put data out there that then people are like, when are you updating it? When are you updating it? What does this mean? What does that mean? Because then all of our time is spent reacting to those questions and doing that. So we've decided that we're not going to publish data You can always get it through Sunshine requests and FOIA. We're not going to publish data until it's done in a quality way. And for us, quality means that there's an SLA, a service level agreement for having it updated it, and we hold our publishers to that. It is documented, and we do all these sorts of quality checks and runs on that, and we automate those business processes wherever possible. So we spend a lot of our time sort of creating the data pipes in the city. And part of those pipe challenges are, in case you haven't heard, building large enterprise technology in the public sector sucks. It's really hard, and there's we still have mainframes. And we have lots of old school technology. And so sometimes one of our core challenges is actually getting out structured data from back-end systems in a way that is knowable. We have vendors that won't give us our reference diagrams for our data models. We have vendors that won't give us back-end access to our databases. I have publicly shamed some of those vendors to get our data from them. So those are mundane challenges, but my team sort of eats that dog food every single day, and it's hard and it's time consuming. And then the other thing is, the reality is that the public servants that I work with are really, really busy, and their job is not to publish data. They have lots of other jobs that they're doing. And so what we've spent a lot of time doing is building out the infrastructure for this to be done easily and as useful as possible. And the last thing is, a key point of accessing and liberating government data is making it useful to government itself, right? So we spent a lot of time inverting the value proposition of open data to having internal value as a data sharing mechanism across the city. Within the city itself, it's very hard to share data. So why would it be easy for them to publish data? And so we've spent a lot of time on changing that value proposition to actually making data more actionable within the city. And if we can do that, then it's sustaining, because if you can see why it's important, then you invest and you approach it.
So that's a very great takedown in terms of the challenges that you're facing, both internally, dealing externally. So I'm kind of curious what role for perhaps citizens in this conversation. So I'm going to swing back over to Alex. Because Alex, you were the one that said, "Hey, no, technology's changing." And everyone's like, "No," but what opportunities maybe do you see, especially with your tool again? But even other examples that are ways for people to get involved, for people to get engaged, not just in terms of building tools, but also to get involved in terms of this conversation, and whether it's shaming, public shaming, becoming more knowledgeable about some of the intricacies of governance, whether it's supporting legislation to make data available.
Yeah. So I guess where I'll start is that I think at the base of all of this is getting people involved. To many is just getting registered, and I think how technology is changing that is just through Facebook today, Google, right? You log on today, and the top banner is go register to vote. I got an email from Lyft yesterday. It said go register to vote. Rock the vote. Yeah. Vote.org. Like, everyone's pushing to get people engaged and more people registered. I have talked with the head of the California Election Committee, and they're a little hesitant, I would say, in terms of experimenting with new technologies to get more people out and participating in voting, and we'll see where that goes. But from our standpoint, we're a mobile app, and we're trying to do the best we can with the data that's available. Some of the challenges include, when you log on to the app, you need to know where the user is, so we can determine who's representing them. And today, we leverage Google for this, but even Google, the data that they have doesn't go down to the local level. So piecemealing that together is almost a challenge that we don't even want to undertake at this point, because it's too mind-boggling. But we think over time, as that data becomes available, I think we'll all benefit, and I would say that we would use it. I know a lot of other groups would use it as well. We also heavily rely on social media and data from the internet. We kind of aggregate that all together in our main feed. And our main feed, if you can picture it, is similar to like a Reddit type style, where people can weigh in on what their politicians are saying, and the best things kind of move to the top in that regard. So, I mean, I think that there is like this whole up and coming, like smaller like tech scene that's all about getting people engaged. And these are tools that were not here 3-4 years ago. And, you know, I'd say by the next presidential election, there's going to be likely dozens more. And I think the more that kind of come to fruition, the better we'll all be.
So the irony of that is you mentioned how you're getting targeted, but yet there isn't a coordinated targeted. So it's like everyone's saying go register to vote, so they don't know you're actually, I'm going to assume for a second, you registered to vote, because it's not, there's like not a shared maybe database. They don't all know who you are, and this kind of goes to the whole creepy buying information thing. But more importantly, what as a kind of was thinking about Debra, and Debra as part of YC, and what you just mentioned in terms of 4 years from now. Building tools, these tools aren't cheap. We've talked about cost a little bit. We'll come back to this cost. So these tools aren't cheap. But election technology isn't necessarily a high-profile or scalable set of tools or industry, right? It's not something that VCs necessarily jump in. So, Debra, you're part of YC, so you're kind of in this milieu, right, a little bit. How do you see funding in this space changing? Actually, let me take a step back. Where do you see the funding coming from right now? How do you see funding in this space changing going forward? And what are any implications of that you see?
We just made an agreement that I would answer this. So where the funding comes from is always a mystery. Our funding currently comes more from venture capitalists, which is interesting because we're a nonprofit organization. I think we're at 60% venture capital and 40% foundations. But I wanted to actually answer the question about why the efforts aren't coordinated, because I literally talk daily to everyone who's running it. Yesterday was National Voter Registration Day, so the idea was to turn on a fire hose, not to hyper target, because when you're talking about culture change and culture shift, which was the power dynamic, the things that we're talking about, you want it to be something where everyone is registering to vote today. So it's very intentional. It's not that we don't coordinate with each other. I mean, good Lord, no one I know has slept in 4 days. Believe me, we coordinate. It wasn't an accident that 6 different groups reached out to you. It's that it really does take 6 attempts to get some people. But in terms of the funding, so funding in this space is a zero-sum game. So if someone funds one project, it means another project isn't funded. And the danger in this space is that the things that get funded aren't the things that have impact. Like Farmville and Pokemon and gamifying voting has, not only does it have, that application have no impact on voting, but it takes money from the things that do have impact on voting. So it's not just a zero-sum game, it is actually a value drain from this space. So as much fun as it was to be in YC and attend capitalist school for 13 weeks, it's super fun. I wish they would just let everyone do it because it was very fun to do. At the same time, watching venture capitalists start to put their toes in the social change space, I was wow, this is really interesting that you don't realize that this is a market that requires expertise just like anything else. And I had a very calm and very long conversation with someone there when I was it's not enough to try to do good. You have to do good or the end result is bad. Yeah. And it was the first time anyone had ever said that to this pretty prominent, shall remain nameless, venture capitalist. And he was oh, I've never thought about that before. So, God, I can't even remember your question. I clearly just decided I was going to give you the answer I wanted to give you. But this isn't just a money issue. This is about money going to things that are effective and not things that are sparkly. And at the end of the day, you know what works? Knocking on people's doors. And you know what works? Talking to people. And you know what doesn't work? It wasn't Mark Rubin who I spoke to. Whatever his app is, that's we're going to, let everyone register by taking a photograph of their license. What? Do you guys know this app? I think it's already gone, but it was just what makes you think that people aren't registered? If you have a license, we can already register you to vote. The problem is already solved.
And the issue is our team was the most diverse team ever to win something like this. And the fact that, we were okay, we need to be hired to do this. We can't just volunteer.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And a lot of the civic hacks, there are people of color that we do this we have degrees, and we create these amazing apps. We win the damn thing. So there's not a diversity problem in tech. There's a problem when we come up with a damn solution to get some funding, to get hired, and paid the right kind of wages to come in and acquire the type of money that it takes to scale a civic solution. So, I mean, the problem on the civic tech side, and I'm so happy that you brought this up. I mean, there's many of us that have won hack after hack after hack. I don't care if it's here, DC, Miami, you name it. It's being able to come in and actually scale things. And the sexy stuff, I remember, and I remember I was down in Palo Alto for Hack Palo Alto a couple years ago, and the head of TOML, she said, well, this stuff is sexy. And then I was talking about the things. There was a group of us that were there, and we were talking about things that we had won. And they were like, well, that's not sexy. Collecting trash is cool, and if we could tell people where the dumpster is, that's awesome. But telling people where housing is not. Where to find affordable housing. So we really have to start calling the question on these things, and civic innovation versus art. Mm-hmm. So mid-market is full of art, right? But there are homeless people and there is problems getting around. But we're not dealing with those things. So we really do need to start looking at the civic innovation and civic tech, what that really means versus gov tech.
I want to jump in on this. Yeah, so the whole technology will save Earth. And I actually think in a lot of ways it does. And our world, is so much better than it used to be through technology. But on the point of civic engagement, let's just look at the results. Okay, so we're not seeing voter turnout increase, and we're not seeing it turn out with millennials increase, despite their growing share of the voter population. So that means, one, all these amazing technology apps have stemmed the flow. It would even be worse if all these technology apps didn't exist. Or it means that they've had no impact, or they have sort of improved it, but we can't really tell, right? So it's one of those questions. It's one of those answers. And so I don't really know what that is, but you can just look at the ultimate outcome, which is turnout. And we're not seeing that shift very much unless you have major get out the vote efforts that are frankly, technology informed and data analytically enabled. But that ends up in the sort of the realm of the experts using it for targeting. It's not in the realm of technology being this amazing magical tool that suddenly now I care about issues.
So actually, Debra, believe it or not, you actually did answer my question.
Oh, good. That was an accident. Sorry.
So what we were trying to figure out is, where's the funding coming from? What are the value sets that are driving it? And the takeaway for the audience is, if they want to get involved, if they want to participate, they want to engage, they want to launch something new, what are the things that they should, consider besides just, hey, this is a great idea. So, but, one of the things that's come out of this is that things are still very issue driven. And so, Alex, I'm gonna jump down over to you now and say, what have you noticed? What are you experiencing in terms of how things are still issue driven? How more informed groups have either become, I'll say, more engaged, or have they created more of an echo chamber, right? Like the Twitter echo chamber. Right? You can get on Twitter and you can only listen to your own side. For those of us who are, the debate was very interesting. You kind of bounce back and forth, and how almost there's massive amounts of conversation going on, completely separate, siloed, same platform, completely different takeaways in the exact same moment. So in terms of the engagement that maybe that you've experienced, or that you're seeing with your tool or with other tools, and the expansion that you foresee going forward, how do you see this, added information? Is it just going to, add to the echo chamber system, or is it actually going to inform people to drive maybe more engagement or more interaction with government in different ways?
I think there is definitely some of that. And talking with a lot of politicos, there is hesitation jumping into any new political sphere. If you're on Reddit, right, you have your political blogs that are, the same people talking about similar things. They're all very like-minded, right? But I think that a lot of the point of a lot of the new technologies coming out is engagement at a bottom line. The act of someone engaging in politics means they care a little bit more. And if everyone collectively, engages just a little bit more, even if we kind of move that average or that needle from, a C to a C plus or whatever it is, right? I think that that does matter on a grand scale. And I think that a lot of these technologies are premature and they're growing, and it's only inevitable before they do have an impact. So I'm optimistic.
I just want to echo that. I mean, I think technology absent a power analysis is just fluff. And that's like pretty much what I learned at YC is one of the partners was like, I have this great idea for an app, and we're going to use like the Facebook system and geolocation. And I was like, why are we going to use a proprietary closed ecosystem? And he was like, what? And I was like, what did you just say? And like, we then spent the next like 30 minutes arguing, and he was like, yeah, we're going to use Facebook. And I was like, no, we're not, because Facebook will immediately change their algorithm to block us. I mean, just look at who's on their board. And also, we don't put democracy in the hands of a proprietary and closed ecosystem. And then he was like, well, we just need $20 million to get started. And I was like, $20 million to build? And like at that point, I was like, oh, you actually know nothing about democracy, despite having a degree in politics from Yale, which is why we even like started the conversation. And I was like, oh, this is interesting that you think that it is like a Facebook algorithm problem instead of structural impediments to voting. So, I mean, that's what goes on with like these apps is I'm like, you have literally no understanding of the problem. So your solution is just like a fun thing to build. And I mean, I get it. My team is always building like fun things to entertain ourselves, but we don't like release that onto the world because, it's for us. But I mean, that's just what's interesting. Technology absent a goal and an understanding of the issue is just nonsense. And we already have Reddit for nonsense. Like, we don't need to invest, said with love to Reddit, but like, we don't need to invest like scarce resources into this because again, they take resources from the actual solutions.
Yes.
So
And
with that said, because we want to do, I want to wrap this up so we can do questions from the audience. So, excuse me. The way I like to wrap this up is I always say, give us one takeaway for the audience. If there's something you'd love the audience to know, there's something you'd like to think. I always say it's a tweetable moment, right? So that the point of that is also keep it brief. But like, give us one tweetable moment, one takeaway for the audience. If you could say one thing. We'll start with Joy. We'll just go straight down the line.
Add puppies to polling places.
Okay. Debra.
You guys could have this tweet. Voter turnout is low because we live in a country where Columbus Day is a federal holiday and Election Day isn't.
Oh, okay. Carla, follow that.
Civic innovation needs to be about making things practical. If we want folks to go to the polls, then we need to make apps that help people get a ride to the polls.
Alex.
I really believe we need to be able to vote online.
Pardon me, say that again?
Vote online.
Vote online. Okay.
Have you been paying any attention to what's going on in the past few days? Russia is already voting online for the U.S.
So let's hold on that.
One day.
I think that's a whole nother story.
Yeah,
But I do trust, the infrastructure and security to enable us to have that sort of technology.
So I'm going to jump in. I'll say this. If you want to keep having that debate, you guys should attend our summit in 2017 because we are going to be talking security, blockchain as part of that discussion. We're going to be talking open source, and we're going to be talking funding and law and policy. So it's a multi-day event. Go check it out on the website. With that said, before we do the questions, just say thank you very much to the panel. I just want Okay, so the way this works is pretty simple. I spy with my little eye, and Regina's got the mic. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. This is a great opportunity for you to actually talk to people about what they're doing, ask them questions, and you can delve a little bit deeper. So, do you have any questions? I've never had no questions. God. Really? Oh, there we go.
Okay, great.
So busy, everyone's tweeting.
Well, I want to, and wait for the mic because we are taping this, so that's why.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know that whether or not you vote is public information. And so that was a really interesting takeaway for me. And I'm just wondering if you've seen, I know we have sort of like, I voted, and people like post their, stickers or wear them to work. But do you know of any work that's kind of gone in the opposite direction of like publicly shaming people that don't vote?
We call that social pressure, not public shame. And
I just mean a technical solution to applying social pressure.
Extremely effective. It's currently done via mail. You send people a voter report card and you let them know their grade, and we will be doing that via text message as we get closer to the election, because people like freak out and they like get all worked up, and so before we get everyone yelling at us. But yeah, it's extremely effective to tell someone like, you are a grade C- voter. Like, yeah, social pressure though, not public shame.
We could do a national requirement, right? What about Australia? They require people to vote, or they fine them.
Oh, compulsory voting is the done-in-one solution, but we won't have that in our country for a while.
Do you have any other questions? Oh, right here. Regina, right here. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Priyanka, and I was wondering, how do you see technology being an amplifier or whatever tool or mechanism for improving democracy beyond the presidential election?
Carla, I think we're going to start.
Okay. I see that one thing we have to do is economics plays a lot. I've been on the trail, and then I've been online, and I've created solutions. We have to really begin to think about how do people vote, and then why do they vote the way they do? When you're a wage worker and you can't get off on election day, and you also are part of the economic divide, and you have to go to some place like City Hall and take the city bus to go there. These are issues that we have to start to look at. And I think once we start looking at economics in terms of folks' access, and it's also who campaigns. So when you're talking about door knocking is done by, folks that have money to take off, a long time, join the campaign trail, or somebody's daddy called in a favor to get that person working on the campaign trail. So we have to start creating equity among those who can campaign, and then looking at our voting, folks, how folks participate at economic levels. So we have to create, those of us who are creating these systems, we actually have to make sure that happens. And those who fund these campaigns have to look at voter equity.
I think between the elections too, like being a good citizen is not just voting once every 4 years or every 2 years, right? There's so much you can do between the elections, whether it's, volunteer, whether it's donate to, a cause that you really care about. I think that, that should all be part of that.
Hello. So I have a question. You mentioned that millennials don't have a lot of representation in the election. Have you seen any specific tactics or initiatives being implemented to bring millennials to the polls? And can you share any of those best practices with us? Thank you.
Take this, or you want me to take it? I mean, I can take this. Every initiative is designed to bring millennials into the polls. I guess, yeah, I'm old enough. This is my 6th election, so I guess we used to be trying to bring Gen X into the fold.
We all remember that, right?
Remember that one? So literally, almost every election initiative targets people under 35. Actually, I could probably just stop there. But then the other group is people of color under 40, and then unmarried women under 35 as well. They're just millennials. So actually, everything is done to bring millennials into the polls. But at the same time, we make it really hard for millennials to vote because we got 30 states that have voter ID laws, and young people don't have driver's licenses anymore because people live in urban areas, and therefore we don't need driver's licenses. And who decided that the DMV was the bedrock of democracy? So
motor voter, remember that?
Yeah. The motor voter law is a separate conversation. But honestly, it's not that people aren't trying to bring millennials into the fold. It's that people have been so effective at keeping millennials out of the fold. So, I mean, rock the vote. They're so old that it used to just be the Gen X thing, but it's all it's all designed to bring young people into the fold, but we need legislative changes to do things like relieve young people of the burden of having a driver's license. I mean, yeah, but I could sit here all day and name groups that do millennial work. I think I run a millennial org, but it wasn't intentional.
Especially when you have autonomous vehicles coming up and projected driver's license is supposed to decrease.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting ways.
Oh, it's already down.
It's way down.
Yeah.
It's down. It used to be 20 years ago, 75% of 18-year-olds had driver's licenses, and now it's only 50%. And 20 years from now, it'll be about 30. And I mean, every time we pass a voter ID law, we're saying if you don't have a driver's license, you can't vote.
An interesting interaction of technology on one side, completely unrelated to, let's say, elections, or elections generally, but having this other impact, this externality.
Yeah, because if we were really just worried about ID, we can take people's thumbprints. My phone takes my thumbprint.
Yep.
Like, you know, there's no reason why if voter ID, if voter ID was an actual if voter fraud was an actual problem, there are actually ways to solve it. Another topic.
Yeah. Diversity is up, economics are down, and in millennials. So there's a great correlation with that, and we need to explore that more.
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, again, we don't give people election day off, so how are you supposed to vote if you like have 2 jobs?
And we have more de facto 1099s, no full-time jobs, mostly 1099s where you have to be hourly. That affects you. You can't get off. And some of these lines are 9 hours long in some of these places.
But only in swing states. It's amazing how that always works out.
Oh yeah, always in a swing state.
Do you have any other questions?
All right, I'm gonna exercise organizer privilege and ask my own question.
This will be the last question. It's perfect.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
perfect.
awesome. All right, I hope this is good. All right. What I've noticed is, you know, right now we've got 2 candidates, both of whom are not really well liked. But what I find myself getting into debates and fights, straight up fights in the echo chamber is about, all right, this is great. You hate that 2-party system, so I'm going to come back to you in 6 months and a year, and I want to see what you're doing to disrupt that system and to, you know, get your green candidate or your libertarians or whomever on these ballots. What are some ways that technology can help? Because that's one of the big issues that a lot of people are complaining about. And so how do we help them change it?
So I'm gonna say, how can technology be used to expand the 2-party system?
So I was taking part in a Harvard hack. So Harvard actually came to San Francisco. So that just shows us Cal Bears and Stanford folks. If Harvard had to come here, so they had they had a hackathon, a democracy hackathon about this. And my team, we actually put together, we called it Urban Borough. And what it was is helping people to be able to crowdsource and give like small amounts of money to run candidates. And figuring that out for a mobile app. And so there's various ways, but our party system is really a chokehold on all cash. So like, remember when we talked about, I said the 527 groups, and then you have folks that are playing both sides of the aisle, and there's so much cash that's involved with this. It really makes it hard for even a community that would try to get money together. So what we need to do is we're gonna have to change some fundamental laws. Like right now in California, we have the Clean Money Act. We need to really pass laws to get those clean money measures done so that we can actually get some equity in here. So I would say that, first of all, it's like really using technology to like make sure folks understand what the elections laws are and on money, and then really begin to change those laws. And then we can actually have some voter equity so we can run some candidates that make sense, that reflect our society.
So with that said, now I get to exercise moderator. As we close down, I always like to end with a few takeaways for the audience. And again, my hope is that the audience can take this, come speak to the panel. It's a fantastic panel, speak amongst each other, and launch new projects. But the 3 takeaways I kind of have from this, I'm oversimplifying, so I apologize for everyone, for the panelists. Number 1, think about sources of data. Joyce set up with the election data. You have ethics data, but you also have the private creepy data. But you can use these in a variety of different.
Good. It's for good. It's not that creepy.
But but when you think about this, think about what your data sources are. Think about how those data sources can be used, and they can be used for good. And it's a great opportunity. Number two, the digital divide has come up in a variety of different contexts. But what I want to kind of drill down on is thinking about technology is shaped by our values. And it's shaped by kind of access to capital and so on and so forth. So when you're looking at building tools out there, really think about, what are the values that you're trying to perpetuate or trying to support, rather? Where's the money going to come from? What are their values? What are their goals? If anything, it sometimes seems a bit of naive comments were made about, oh, we'll just build this because one group is living in a very kind of affluent society and another group is not. And so that's a gross oversimplification. And number three, I get to say this because I am the attorney up here. It's amazing that with all this talk about technology, we still can't ignore the law.
That's right.
And so this is something I usually work with. I work with technologists all the time. I work with the city. I work with startups. And it's something that still amazes me to this day that I have to be sometimes the bad guy and say, yeah, that's not going to happen. The law is just not going to let you, and no, you can't disrupt that. No. So you have to change the law. You can change the law, but that's fundamentally different, right? You can change the law. You can activate. You can motivate. You can engage on these tools. But the law does still matter in this. And so a lot of times when I say this all the time, especially in civic tech groups, sometimes we're really understanding what the problem is. It's not necessarily a tech problem / tech solution. It might be a law problem. It might be something that we have to think a little bit differently about how we're trying to solve this or getting to the core problems. So with that said, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for Regina. Thank you to Bloomberg. Have a great night.